Life can be messy, painful, confusing. In the search for truth, we discover many possible answers. The account of John gives us 7 clear signs that we should believe and follow Jesus.
His sickness just kept getting worse. They had tried everything, they had called the doctors, and nothing was working. They even had a friend who had been known to do miracles to fix sicknesses, and so they had called for him, but he didn't get there in time. And so these 2 sisters watched as their brother passed away. Many had come together to be with the family, and a few days later, when the teacher and miracle worker came and they saw him and in his deep emotional stress, they said, "This man had given sight to the blind. Surely he could have healed this man if he had just been here." For those of you who are joining us, we've been in this series called Signs, where we've been looking at the 7 signs in the Gospel of John that point to the fact that Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. Jesus is the one who we should put our trust in. At Restore Church, we say it all the time that we exist to help hurting people find hope and healing in Jesus. And what John is writing about in his account, he's saying, listen, I saw Jesus do these things, and he's listed out these signs that Jesus has done, from showing the power to transform, the power to end sickness, the power to end suffering, the power to give sight, the power to feed and sustain those who are hungry. And John's saying, listen, I saw these things with my very own eyes. So you who haven't seen Jesus, you should place your trust in him. And so all this is on, we've been looking at the first half of John, and in the spring we're actually going to look at the second half. But today is concluding this series on the signs, and I hope for those of you who've been tracking with us that you've been reading along with John. This is a great series. You can go back and look at some of these videos because these signs help us to understand the Gospel of John. But today, as we listen to John's account, we see that we should actually believe in Jesus, and when we put our faith in Jesus, it changes everything. And today we're going to see this final sign, that Jesus has the power to give new life. This is who Jesus is. He's the one who can do everything. He is the God of the Old Testament, is John's claim. Again, we've talked about this a few times, that John's writing to second and third and fourth generation Christians. He's writing after the first 3 gospel accounts have been written. So John would know about Matthew and Mark and Luke. And he's writing to people who are deciding whether or not they're going to trust in Jesus. And he's saying, you should believe in him. I know you didn't see Jesus' life, his death, and his resurrection, but I saw him do these things. So in other words, he's kind of writing to people like you and me, people who didn't experience Jesus' life. But what John is saying is, you should trust in Jesus. And this final sign is this is the one where it just shows so clearly that Jesus is God. Jesus is the one we should put our faith in. Now, this account that John is going to share, that we're going to look at today in John 11, this account kind of has 2 halves. And one is kind of a theological, head knowledge, brain one, and it kind of stays there. And then it turns and we see that Jesus actually is emotional on this topic. So we're going to be looking at death and God's response to it. And we're going to see okay, there's this theological head knowledge side, but then there's also this deeper emotional side where Jesus connects with us. So the first thing that we're going to see is this theological side, that this world is broken and it's filled with sickness and with suffering. And now this is where I don't have to convince you of this part. John, when he's writing this, doesn't have to try real hard to say, hey, our world's not the way that it's supposed to be. Anyone who looks around can see, man, there's a lot of pain in this world. There are ways that this world is not the way it's supposed to be. And to to the people living in this first century time, like, they knew this well. They saw sickness and suffering all around them. And so this account would make a lot of sense to them. It starts here, John 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. In the gospel accounts, we don't actually know much about Lazarus. We're told here that Jesus loved him. The Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the other gospel writers, don't mention Lazarus, but they talk quite a bit about Mary and Martha and Jesus' interaction with them. But we see that Jesus cared for him. And now he lays sick, and he finds out about this. And he says, listen, this is not going to end in death. Like, there's this pattern that the first century would see is someone gets sick and they fight the sickness, and the sickness leads to death. And this shows the suffering and the pain that was in the world then, and really the suffering and the pain that still exists with us today. One of the takeaways from this is, like, God gets the pain that we experience. He gets the desperation that we sometimes feel. Jesus knows, though, what he is going to do. Jesus knows that he's going to do a great and miraculous work. And when we're thinking through both the knowledge side and the emotional side, we need to remember this point. Jesus says, this sickness is not going to end in death. This is foreshadowing. Jesus knows the sign that he's going to do. So we need to keep this back. We need to have this in the back of our minds as we continue to read this. But there's another theological point here, another head knowledge point here, is that this sickness is an opportunity for Jesus to work. Again, it wasn't hard to find sick people in this day. Like, Rome is ruling over the nation of Israel. The Jews were in really difficult situations. Like, their life was hard, and sickness would be all around them. There would be a lot of sick people. And you see this throughout the gospel accounts. But this sickness is an opportunity for God to work. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days, which seemed like, I still think is a little bit odd. It's like, he loved this family, but he stayed there for 2 more days before he does anything else. Verse 7, and then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. But they protested, Rabbi, just a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you. They wanted to kill you, and yet you're trying to go back. Verse 9, Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the darkness will stumble, for they see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. So Jesus cares for them. He cares for Mary and Martha and Lazarus. He hears that Lazarus is sick, yet he waits 2 days. Again, we have to remember how this footnote from verse 4, like, Jesus knew what he was going to do. Jesus knew that this sickness was not going to end in death. But Jesus also has a broader plan for Lazarus. And he has a broader plan even for his disciples and for Mary and Martha to display the glory of God. Jesus knows what he's going to do. But the disciples here, okay, Jesus is ready to go back. And they're like, no, you can't go back. It's dangerous there. And Jesus talks about the time of day, and we saw this last week in John 9, that Jesus is talking about the hours of the day. And he's saying, aren't there still 12 hours of daylight? Now, we need to understand, like, this is getting close to the end of Jesus' ministry and close to the end of his life. The first sign is kind of at the beginning of his ministry, and now he's done his work, which all of the Gospels show that Jesus is on this path to his death on the cross. But he's saying, listen, there's still more time. For those of us who believe in Jesus, as his followers, I think this is such an important note for us. That we need to pay attention to the numbers of our days. We need to pay attention to the opportunity that we have. Because Jesus, when it's coming down to the end of his life, he's saying, listen, there's 12 hours in a day. There's 12 hours of daylight. There's still time for us to work. And as a church, like, this is still our belief. It's like we still have time to share the goodness of God to our community. We still have this opportunity to bless people. We talk about the bless strategy to share the goodness of Jesus, which bless is an acronym for begin in prayer. For those who don't know Jesus, listen with care to their stories. Eat with them. Eat with people who do not know Jesus, to get to know them, to build that relationship. Find ways to serve them. If you listen to someone, if you eat with them, you're going to find some opportunities to hear what's going on in their life and ways to serve them. And out of that, you can share your story of how God has helped you, how Jesus has changed your life, so that they can ultimately find Jesus. Like, as a church, that's why we talk a lot right now about we need to invest in people who don't know Jesus, and we need to invite them to church until they come. Because, like Jesus is saying, there's 12 hours in a day. We have time to make a spiritual impact. We have time to point people to the goodness of Jesus, to show that there is hope in the one who came, which is, again, why John is writing this whole gospel. He's saying, there's one you should trust in. We who follow Jesus need to share this goodness to those who do not yet know him. One more theological point. Not only is this sickness an opportunity for Jesus to show what he's doing, this death is an opportunity to show that Jesus is God. Jesus could have jumped in. He could have gone and healed Lazarus, but he chooses not to. Even though he loves Lazarus, even though he loves Mary, even though he loves Martha. After he had said this, verse 11 says, after he had said, there's 12 hours of daylight, verse 11, he went on to tell them, the disciples, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. Verse 12, the disciples replied, Lord, if he's asleep, he's going to get better. But Jesus had been speaking of his death, of Lazarus' death, but the disciples just thought that he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. He's passed. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. But let us go. Then Thomas said to the rest of them, let us go, that we may die with him. Jesus knew what he had planned to do with Lazarus. He knew that Lazarus was going to die. He knew that this sickness would lead to death. But he also had in mind what he planned to do. And again, this is so important as we look at this account. Because there's this head knowledge spot where Jesus is like, just trust, believe, know that it's going to be all right. Know that I'm going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Know that I have the power, that I'm going to point to the goodness of God. Know that I'm in control. Know that I'm doing everything. Why? So that you may believe. Like John is telling us again and again and again, this is what you need to see from Jesus' life. He's the one you should put your faith in. He's the one you should trust in. When we face death, when we're looking at our own mortality, when we're looking at the mortality of those we love, it's so important that we have the same type of confidence. Like, this is what This is why Jesus came. Jesus came to undo the effects of sin and suffering, and ultimately to undo the effects of death. Sin leads to death, and Jesus came to undo this. If this is all who God is, that is really good. Like if what God came to do is just like take away our the effects of sin and death, that would be good. But Jesus does more than just that. Jesus does more than just fix the issue. It's not just a head knowledge thing. There's an emotional side of this where Jesus actually meets us in our grief. And this is why he's not just a powerful God, but he's a good and compassionate God. So we're going to see this emotional side of Jesus, where Jesus meets us in our grief, and we see this with Martha's account. So Jesus is now heading to Bethany. Verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, where Jesus had been, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. A few things here. The implication is that Jesus is probably just 2 miles away from Mary and Martha and Lazarus. We don't know that for sure, but Jesus probably could have made the trip in time to get there before Lazarus died. But even if he couldn't, even if that's not the case, we've already seen in John that Jesus healed a dad's sick and dying son from a distance. Jesus could have intervened, and he chooses not to. He's coming home, and we see the different reactions to Mary and Martha. Martha runs out to meet Jesus, but Mary stays at home. The Greek actually says like she's sitting at home. She's stuck in that spot. I'm not sure how you respond to grief, or if you've ever had to deal with really difficult grief, but there's two different actions that we have. Like sometimes, like some people have the urge to like go and do everything and like fix things, and that's how they get through grief, and others are just like stuck in this spot of sitting, and sometimes we go back and forth between the two. But we see that Martha has to act, like she has to do something, and we see that Mary is sitting. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Can you picture this? Like, the sister has lost her brother. She runs out to Jesus and she says, Jesus, if you had been here, which you weren't, the Greek is really saying, if you had been here, which you weren't, my brother would not have died. But I still know that God will do whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Believe, Mary, believe. He's saying to Martha, believe. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Again, like Martha's like thinking that this is still like that head knowledge thing of like, I trust, I know that God is going to rise up my brother in the last day. I know that there's hope. And she's looking forward to the last day. But Jesus has something different in mind. She still has that faith. Like maybe she's not even necessarily feeling it all, but she has that faith. We've been talking through John with each one of these 7 signs. They also loosely connect to the 7 I am statements in John. And we've seen like sometimes they connect right in it. And this account has an I am statement, one of the 7 I am statements right packed in the story. And we see this in verse 25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. That's who Jesus is. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. He's the one that gives new life to us. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into this world. She has trust in Jesus even in this difficult time. But Jesus, you can tell like this is still emotional. He's meeting her in her grief. We see this emotional side that Jesus also meets us in our grief, and we see this in Mary's account. Verse 28. After she heard this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here and is asking for you. I don't know like where you're at in your life, but if you are experiencing grief, or if you've experienced grief in your life, or you're going through some sadness or depression, like this statement here is so true for all of us. The teacher is here and he's asking for you. Jesus wants to meet us in our pain, in our suffering. Jesus sees when we're going through the tough time. The teacher's here, and he's asking for you. Jesus wants to meet you in whatever you're going through. The teacher is here, and he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, verse 29 says, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Mary had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, assuming that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at her feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same thing that her sister said. Lord, if you had been here, which you weren't, my brother wouldn't have died. It's okay to bring our negative emotions. It's okay and good to bring our hurt to Jesus. He invites that. He handles this, even if it's a question. Because here's who Jesus is. He's a God who meets us in our grief, in our pain, in our hurt. Verse 33. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The Greek there is actually kind of funny. It's like he snorted like a horse. Like there's like this animal instinct of almost rage towards death that boils up. He's deeply moved. Verse 34. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then Jesus wept. Now, I told you to remember from the beginning what Jesus had in mind to do. He had said, this sickness isn't going to end in death. He had said to Martha, I'm going to raise your brother from the dead. But he sees these people in their mourning, and he weeps for them and with them. That's who Jesus is. He's the God who weeps with us. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who have opened the eyes and given sight to the blind have kept this man from dying? Jesus knew what he was going to do. He knew he had a plan to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knew that this was like the theological thing, the thing that people needed to see, but his plan was larger. And even with that large plan, he sees humans in their suffering and he weeps. Man, grief is so hard. I think it's almost been 5 years since my dad passed just suddenly. And the amount of grief that I went through was so difficult. I remember being in that spot, kind of like Mary or Martha. And one moment stands out. I was sitting on the stairs just like sobbing, and my daughter, who was 9, said something like, "Dad, can I make it better? How can I make it better?" And I was like, "You can't." And I'm just like, here I am, like I'm supposed to be taking care of her, and I can't. Like, this grief was just overwhelming. And throughout the years, like, God has been helping me through that grief and helping me through that hurt. And I had that head knowledge that because my dad trusted in Jesus, who had risen from the dead, my dad would have that hope of heaven. But it still hurt. And to think, Jesus wept with me. He didn't immediately try to fix that problem. He sits with us and he weeps with us. Like, what an amazing God. This is the God that our world needs. It's the God that I need. Jesus' remarkable love leads to action. We don't just have a God who sits and weeps with us. We have a God who is powerful and mighty. We have this wonderful, compassionate, powerful God. Verse 38, Jesus, once more, deeply moved. Again, he's an emotional God. He came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," Martha, the sister of the dead man, said, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." We don't really spend time around deceased bodies. Previous cultures had to do that. Bodies are taken away quickly. The Jews in that day, they knew death. And they're like, you don't go around a body after 4 days. Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Jesus rose the dead. Jesus gave new life to a man who's dead. John is writing this and he's saying, I saw this. I testify to this. If this is true, Jesus is who he says he is. He is the God of the Old Testament. He's the God who created this world. He's the God who can give us hope, and you should put your faith in him. If this is true, we've got to tell our community. We've got to tell our nation and our world, this is the one who we will hope in. This is the one who can actually bring change to hurt, who can actually end suffering. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. From here on out, it's like this is the end game in John. Because right after this, the rest of John 11 goes on to talk about the Jewish leaders are like, all right, we've got to kill this man. It's time to end it. And Jesus is now on a march to the cross. He's given a foretaste to all of us. He's proven that he can do whatever human needs. He can end the sting of death. He can bring new life. Jesus has the power and the compassion to give new life to you and me. That's who he is. That's what he did. Again, I want to echo John's words. John's saying, this is who Jesus is. This is what John saw Jesus do. John's willing to go to the death because he believes in this, so that people like you and me can believe. And I'm not sure where you're at, but if you don't believe in him, I just say, look at this account. It's worth trusting in Jesus because he is God. He's the God who can bring us life. Maybe some of you have, for those of you who put your faith in Jesus, I think there's something so deep in Jesus's, in the words that Martha said to Mary. The teacher's here, and he's looking for you. It's so natural for us to hide in our hurt or our pain, our suffering. And like sometimes we're in that spot of pain, we actually put a distance between us and God. And what I want you to hear is this, like the teacher is here, Jesus is here, and he's looking for you. Jesus wants to meet you in that spot to bring hope and healing to your life. That's what Jesus does. And it takes that openness and that vulnerability so that Jesus can bring healing to your life. That's what God wants to do in your life. The last thing I want us to take away from this account is that Lazarus is that proof, that evidence that Jesus can bring hope even in death, even in suffering. Jesus can bring us hope. So when you look and think about the end of your life or the end of the life of those that you love, know that there is hope. Know that there is peace. Know that you should trust in Jesus. And know that this good news needs to be shared. I'm going to pray, and Simon's going to lead us in communion. This is a way that we respond to this good news that we talk about, that Jesus came and died and rose again so that you and I can have new life. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for this day. I thank you that you are a compassionate and loving God, but a powerful God who can end even death. God, I need that hope, and we need that hope. Thank you for your amazing love that you've shared with us. Help us to receive it. Help us to share it. All for your glory. We pray this in your name. Amen.